Product managers don't own the sales team. That doesn't mean that the product managers and product leaders shouldn't feel accountable to the revenue numbers. The lifeblood of a business is growth, and every business has some kind of transformation that it's probably going through. And we incubate the new products with all of these people together. And what that allows us to do is, as we're hearing feedback from the market, we can build enhancements to the product very, very quickly. The best place to start is with your existing customers. If they love your product, they're going to give you a warm intro to the other personas. Biggest business risk is that you're going to churn your customers, or you're going to substantially decelerate your new sales because of this change that you're making in the business. What matters the most is you have at least one.
Hey, this is Carlos's AI voice clone. Carlos is the CEO of Product School and the host of the Product Podcast. He asked me to set the stage before he takes over the mic. This episode was recorded live from our podcast studio in San Francisco. Today's guest is Anneka Gupta, Chief Product Officer at Rubrik, a leading cybersecurity company that helps over 5,000 customers, including half of the Fortune 500, protect, manage, and recover their data in the face of ever-evolving cyber threats. Since joining in 2021, Anneka has been the driving force behind one of the most impressive product transformations in tech. She helped evolve Rubrik from an IT backup solution into a full-scale cybersecurity platform, and the results speak for themselves. Rubrik went public in 2024. Subscription ARR crossed $1.09 billion, and the company's market cap climbed well past $10 billion. In this episode, Anneka shares hard-earned lessons from leading 3 massive transformations: shifting Rubrik's business model from perpetual licenses to a SaaS-first approach, expanding from a single product company to a multi-product platform, with 2 new product lines now approaching $100 million in ARR, and repositioning Rubrik as a cybersecurity-first company trusted in high-stakes enterprise environments. She also gets real about navigating tough org changes and learning from early missteps. If you're an enterprise product leader navigating change at scale, you're in for a treat. Let's dive in.
This episode is brought to you by Persona, the adaptable identity platform that helps businesses fight fraud, meet compliance requirements, and build trust. For example, how can you know you're really listening to me, Carlos, and not my AI voice clone? These days, it's easier than ever for fraudsters to steal voices, faces, and identities. That's where Persona comes in, helping leading companies such as LinkedIn, OpenAI, Etsy, and Twilio to securely verify individuals and businesses worldwide, going far beyond traditional identity checks. Of course, every company has different needs depending on its industry, use cases, risk tolerance, and user demographics. That's why Persona provides flexible building blocks that allow you to build tailored verification flows that maximize conversion while minimizing risk automatically. Whether you work at a startup or large enterprise, listeners to the Product Podcast can get started for free by visiting withpersona.com/product school. That's withpersona.com/product school. Welcome to the Product Podcast, Anneka.
Thanks so much for having me.
I didn't know that you used to live literally across from this building.
Yeah, I can see my old apartment from here.
So cool. Well, as you know, the Product Podcast is all about bringing product executives so we can have a real and deep conversation on topics that are top of mind for a lot of executives. As the CPO at Rubrik, I know you went through a lot of quote-unquote transformations, and I'm hoping that this is the conversation for other people to really unpack what transformation means and kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited to talk about it. It's been quite a journey over the past 4 years.
So we can start by just describing a little more about Rubrik.
Yep. Rubrik is a cybersecurity company. So we help organizations minimize their business downtime during cyber attacks by helping them quickly recover from cyber events and get their applications back up and running.
I know it was probably not the description that you had for your company a few years ago. You've been around the company for 4 years, right?
Yes.
So the 4 types of transformations that I hope we can cover are around business model. You change the business model, you reposition the company, you also reorg the company. Yes. And what else did you? What else didn't you? Is there anything you didn't change?
It's quite incredible thinking back on the past 4 years, because I think about where the business was 4 years ago, and it's just a radically different company and business. And yet the essential values and many of the things that are the reasons why I joined the company are absolutely still true today. So I'm especially proud of being able to drive a lot of this transformation while keeping the core and roots of the values intact.
So why do consultants and all these other vendors talk about transformation? And what does that really mean for you?
I think transformation comes in many different forms. If you think about a business, the lifeblood of a business is growth. And every business has some kind of transformation that it's probably going through. If it's a more traditional business or a business that's been around for many years that's trying to figure out how do they innovate, how do they keep up with what's happening from a competitive standpoint, there's a vast amount of transformation required to actually go execute against that accordingly. If you're a tiny startup, everything you're doing is transformation because you're creating a completely new business, a completely new company, a completely new product, trying to prove that, and what you're learning today is going to radically transform how you're approaching your business tomorrow. And when you're something in between, like Rubrik was when I joined, we were about 100 million ARR. We'd been around for 7 or 8 years, and we were really in this moment where we had scaled very significantly over the years since founding, but we had these immense ambitions for what we could be as a business. And that was a super exciting time to come in because not only were we trying to rethink some of the fundamentals of how we'd gone to market historically and really transforming from going from a perpetual license to subscription and SaaS-based revenue, but then also saying, well, we see these unique opportunities in the market in front of us. How do we make sure we accelerate and lean into those and innovate and not just incrementally continue to progress forward, but go after these big opportunities that could totally transform the market that we're in?
And one of the things that I noticed, we do a lot of product transformations for large enterprises, is that they are only successful if they really come from the top.
Yes.
Like without any executive support, at the end of the day, it ends up just being a cute initiative for some people, but you don't really drive that behavioral change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the great advantages of being at a founder-led company. Our CEO is a founder, our CTO is a co-founder, is that they are setting this vision and ambition, and then really helping align the entire company around going and executing against it.
Well, let's talk about the first one.
Yes.
Business model transformation.
Yeah. This one was an interesting one. So when I came to Rubrik, we were maybe a year or two into a pretty massive business model transformation, going from selling perpetual licenses to really more of a SaaS subscription model to the business. And when I joined, there were many pieces of this transformation. Some of it was, how do we sell to the customer? How do they buy? What does that look like? And then some of it was actually the product itself. And it required us moving our customers from a purely on-premise solution to a cloud-based solution. So when you're talking about doing both of those things in parallel, which is basically selling in a completely different way and then delivering the product in a completely different way, really what you're talking about touches every single aspect of how you build your products, how you take them to market, how you support your customers on an ongoing basis. So this transformation truly touched every single part of the business.
I think this is important. So it's not just repackaging your on-premise product into a subscription, because obviously selling a subscription, something recurring, it sounds better.
Yeah.
It's also building the product accordingly.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Let's talk about that. Like, what is the ugly part of actually switching that business model? What are the things that you had to really fight hard to make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think because this is we're talking about product, I'll really focus on the product and technology aspect of it. So when we were thinking about this, we were trying to figure out, well, what we needed our customers to do was we needed them to switch from using kind of an on-premise management of our product to using a cloud-based management of the product. The cloud-based version to manage the product at that stage was still very early. So we didn't even have full parity of capabilities between these two ways of managing our product. So that was step one. It's like, first we have to get parity, because how are we possibly going to convince a customer to move over if they're losing 70% of their features along the way? So that was one piece of it. The second piece was getting them comfortable with operating the type of product we had in the cloud. And that meant getting them comfortable from a security standpoint, getting them comfortable with like the change management of what that looks like when you're delivering an on-premise solution. You're updating it once a year, once every 6 months. Now we're going to be releasing every week, every 2 weeks. How do you get them comfortable with with them with that frequency of change, and how do you show them the value proposition of why this is so valuable to them. And then, of course, there was a lot around also how we packaged, priced, how we launched our SKUs, all of that we had to work through as well.
So I want to dig on that, because I want to know, is it about, okay, at some point you define that when there's a deadline and from now on we're only selling a subscription?
Yeah.
Or was there any type of progressive rollout where you still have to kind of grandfather people into the previous plan?
Yeah, we have like a very complex set of cohorts of different customer types and different licenses that they had been on, and figuring out how are we going to transition these customers. So we essentially set a date where all new customers that were basically new logos to the business would start consuming would only be sold the new SKUs and the new license and the new model and the new product. While we came up with a plan to migrate existing customers to the new product and new models. So we had both things going in parallel. So we did set a date, probably about a year after I joined, where we said, okay, from this date onwards, all new customers have to buy the new solution, and the new way of pricing it. And then it took us another 2-3 years to migrate all of the rest of the customers cohort by cohort onto the new model and onto the new product. And in some cases, we were able to migrate them to the new business model without before they actually migrated on the product. So we were able to say, okay, we're going to migrate them to the new business model, but then within 12 months, you have to migrate to the new product. So we had kind of a different approaches that we were taking. And a lot of this was dictated by, one, what we thought, what was the timeline, what were going to be the barriers to actually get customers comfortable with this. And two was also just like, what are we financially allowed to do? Because we were also in the process of going from being a private company to a public company, and we needed to make sure the SEC was aligned with how we were approaching this. So there were requirements that they were giving to us about how we manage this, and our auditors were saying, hey, you got to take this kind of approach. So within the constraints they were giving us, we were figuring out our migration plan.
So it was not just internal discussions, also that you had to verify that with
exactly
public.
Yeah.
So one of the challenges that I can imagine is, of course, as much as someone wants to say, from now on, now we're only selling a subscription, you still have to move people along. What are some of those risks for new clients that are saying, no,
yeah,
I still want that other plan that I saw a month ago? So how do you navigate that in a way that your business can continue to grow?
Yeah. So we were very thoughtful in the approach, and we gave ourselves a lot of time before we set this hard deadline of all new customers have to move on to the new set of solutions. So what we did was we had these progressive dates where we said, well, we're going to honor quotes that have already been sent out to customers up until a certain amount of time. Even after we launched that deadline, we said, okay, if you quoted a customer 2 months before the deadline, we can't just go back to them and say, okay, we're changing the way that you're buying, right? They're at a very late stage in the process. So we were really thoughtful about how to manage that piece of it. And then we also did give a small out. We did say that for some customers, if this is too big of a change and some prospects, and this is a really big deal that we want to sign, we'll give them a little bit more leeway to buy on the old model or to use the old product, but they need a path to migrate to the new product, and they need the expectation set up front that they're going to have to do that, so that we don't sell with like a misunderstanding to the customer. Because in all of this, like the biggest business risk is that you're going to churn your customers, or you're going to substantially decelerate your new sales because of this change that you're making in the business.
Exactly. That's one of the risks that I see. Like there has to be enough conviction from the company to say, and we're marching forward. If you give them too much of an out, at some point you end up in this forever gray area where people are still making exceptions and we are not moving forward into the future.
Yeah. And what was really important to us is we knew that the prize on the other side of this was very big, that if we could truly be a software SaaS technology company and viewed that way, and you're not going to be viewed that way selling perpetual licenses, then that's gonna materialize in how we're valued as a company and business, and our ability to even move quickly in terms of product innovation and expanding our product suite, et cetera. So we knew it was laying the foundation for something much bigger, and that we had to do this, and that we had to also make substantial progress on this before we became a public company. So all of those things were tied together, which put I think everyone on the executive team like really on the same page of we've got to go make this happen, whatever it's going to take.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, gives you a different multiple.
Exactly.
So what was the business impact after that transformation from a market cap perspective or revenue perspective?
It's hard to quantify that exactly because we went from being a private company to a public company, and so there was a lot of dynamics at play there. But what I will say is that when I joined, when we looked at our ARR, which was our subscription business, it was 100 million, and now we're 1.1 billion in 4 years. So that was a massive, I think that just showcases the success we've had in both transitioning the existing business as well as expanding that business and selling to a lot more new customers as well in that time.
Well, let's talk about that, like the multi-product transformation.
Yes.
Like what was your original product and then how did you go about expanding your portfolio?
So our original product, Rubrik, started as a modern backup and recovery company, always with an eye on security and built with a very secure architecture. But we were often selling into an IT organization who was trying to think about modernizing their infrastructure and modernizing their backups. What we found a couple of years in is that people were not just recovering their data because of traditional issues like natural disaster or sort of accidental deletion of data, but actually because they were getting hit by ransomware attacks. And the ransomware attackers were coming in, encrypting their data, deleting their data, and making it impossible for them to get their business back up and running unless they paid the ransom. So as we saw that opportunity, we said, well, actually, like what we should be focusing on is not just this kind of IT issue around backup and recovery, but really transforming the business into a cybersecurity business and really solving for a larger set of issues around cyber recovery and cyber resilience. So in the past 4 years, we've really doubled down on our products and we've expanded those across and solving a much broader set of security challenges in addition to the IT challenges that we're facing.
I think that also involves some sort of repositioning.
Yes.
Right? It's not just we're tacking in a
Correct.
new product. It's like now we are telling a different story.
Yes.
So tell me more about like how that GTM change also impacted your product portfolio and vice versa.
Yeah. So I think a lot of it was like, how do we think about building credibility as a security company? Because you can decide to change your positioning on day one, but do your customers think of you this way? Do people in the media think of you this way? Do your investors think of you this way, right? There's so many different stakeholders out there of like, we're trying to influence their opinion. Do other players in the security space think of you as a security company? So we really looked at like, how do we build this credibility? And that came down to like, one is like, how do we talk about ourselves? How do we talk about the outcomes that we're driving? Like, what do our case studies look like? What does our first meeting deck look like? Every single part of how we show up in front of our customers and prospects has to look like we're a cybersecurity company. We have to talk in that language. But then we did like really creative things. Like we have a group called Rubrik Zero Labs who publishes original research around cybersecurity, specifically around data security. We've done a lot of we participate in different kinds of events now. We've doubled down on our partnerships and integrations with other leading cybersecurity companies like Zscaler and CrowdStrike and Microsoft and Okta and others. So we've really tried to think about, well, what is it? How do we establish that credibility? Obviously, it all comes down to first you have to have a product that is solving that problem, but then how do you actually use all the channels and mediums possible to change the perspective of what your business is?
So bring that now to the product world. Let's say, okay, we have a new story. I don't know if you are talking about also additional user personas involved in this. Like, how do you also make sure that what you're building is actually aligned with that new story?
Yeah. I'm very much a believer in a first principles approach to everything in product of saying, well, like, okay, like who who are we trying to, like, who is the person that we're trying to solve for inside the enterprise? Well, obviously, first of all, who are the types of customers that we're selling to? Who are the personas, both old personas and new personas that we're trying to solve for? Is the problem that we're trying to solve for them important and urgent enough? And then how do we build a product that's actually going to solve that problem well? And I think, like, when we looked at our business, we were already helping with cyber recovery. So we already had a great foundation there where people were calling us when they got hit with ransomware attacks, our customers, and saying, help us recover. So we had an in there already. And the first thing to do was, like, look at, well, what else can we provide in our product suite that's going to help them in the steps that they're taking to actually do the recovery itself? Just even looking at our current personas. And then we were saying, well, okay, well, what additionally can we do? Maybe that touches other personas, but still in this whole workflow of cyber recovery. Now, a lot of what we did is we talked to people externally from the company. I hired more people onto my team that had security backgrounds. We hired more people in our field organization who knew security and could talk about it both from, like, a sales perspective, but then from a more technical perspective too within our sales engineering organization. So we started to build the muscle and the people internally that could then, like, collaborate together and figure out, how do we go, like, what else do we want to build? What else do we want to solve for? And making sure that we're not just building products in a vacuum, but that we're building it tied to a go-to-market strategy where we're actually going to get adoption and move the needle.
So 2 things I'm taking away from what you just said is, number one, it seems like it's important to do some sort of internal transformation or evangelism to really believe what we are now going to start telling others. And I think hiring people that come from those type of backgrounds is a definitely good angle for that. And then also, as you think about, okay, like, what do we build next? How do we expand? It's interesting that existing customers were kind of hacking the system and giving you those signals.
Yeah.
It's not just about trying to come up with the next
Correct.
thing. It's probably, the answer is probably inside. You just need to look for it.
Exactly. And I think whenever you're doing product expansion, and we've done it across multiple fronts and selling to different personas, whether it's in IT or in security as well, the best place to start is with your existing customers. Because if you can go to an existing customer and they're much more willing, if they love your product, they're going to give you a warm intro to the other personas. And they're going to sit with you in a room and you can be like, hey, I'm thinking about building this. I'm thinking about solving this problem. Is this an important problem for you to solve? Like, if we built it this way, would you buy it? And they're going to give you they'll give you an honest answer, but they're also just way friendlier in that. And when you can prove repeatedly with your existing customers, then it's a lot easier to go to someone that has never heard of you before and sell them on a solution.
So was that the main motion, like going from
Every time we've launched a new product, it has been, let's go prove it with our existing customers first. Not to say that we won't sign a new customer who wants it too, but let's really make sure that we prove it with our existing customers and be able to show that we can sell to them before going really hard and trying to make this a motion that we're selling into a completely new business.
So here's a challenge for you.
Yes.
Come from the startup world.
Yes.
And we live in a constant transformation.
Yes.
Right? We hear something from a customer and it's relatively
Yes.
Easy for us to make changes and adjust to what they're saying. You are building at a different scale and you are hearing these type of signals from customers, but at the same time, it takes time to build it the right way. I also stay compliant with the different enterprise parameters. How do you find those ways to still stay scrappy and test things to a certain degree before you fully deploy the solution?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think the approach that we have taken that's worked really well is really putting resources 100% dedicated to these new products and new efforts. So we have product managers for new products that are completely dedicated to that new product area. We have engineers that are completely dedicated to that. We have people on the sales team and sales engineering team who are totally dedicated. And we incubate the new products with all of these people together. And what that allows us to do is, as we're hearing feedback from the market, we can build enhancements to the product very, very quickly. We're not waiting on what everyone else is doing. We're not having to prioritize a lot of these capabilities side by side with something in the core product because it's really hard to make that kind of trade-off decision. So we have the resources there. The other thing that we're really cognizant of, and I think Rubrik did this really well from the day it started the company, and now we take this approach for all the new products, is really thinking about for new products, and when we're in a sales cycle for the new product, being cognizant of who we're qualifying in and who we're qualifying out of the pipeline. On day one, you don't need to solve for 80% of organizations and their needs. You need to find the people that are going to be like the right fit for the stage of the product you have today and are going to go on the journey with you. And as you mature the product, the people that you can sell to, your sellable addressable market, can grow. But it doesn't need to, on day one, be everyone. So we're really thoughtful when we're launching new products of who are the customers that we want to target within our existing customer base, and how do we, based on their requirements as we talk to them, how do we qualify in the customers that are actually going to be good for this product as it stands today?
And what is some of that criteria to decide who qualifies in?
It depends on the product. So a lot of it will be, well, if you have, but there's some things that are common. We sell a lot to large banks, healthcare, highly regulated organizations. If we're trying to go take a new feature to a tier one bank, or new product to a tier one bank, okay, the amount of security requirements that they're going to have, the amount of maturity that they're going to want to have, all of that stuff is quite high. So it usually is not the best to start with our biggest, most complex customers on the new products, because realistically, their requirements are much larger than what we're going to support on a day one product. However, we can kind of go into the middle of the customer base, who still is sophisticated enough to see value in the product, but doesn't have like the 100 prerequisites before they can even like look at and test the product to get it up and running. So that's usually like one filter that we can put in. But then it really depends on the product, because on day one, like you might, like one of the new products that we launched close to the time that I joined, it was a product where there were a lot of competitors in the market, and those competitors had 20 times the features that we had in our initial version of the product. And so we had to go in and find and we had to go and say, well, what is the one thing in our product that we do better than everyone else? And it was performance. And so for some customers, even if we only had a 10th of the features or 20 of the features, if the performance was so much better, they were going to buy the product. And so we found a place where there are certain organizations who really, really cared about performance. And so we went and sold to those organizations, and we worked with them on the roadmap, and we sold them on the roadmap of the future, and we delivered on that roadmap so that they saw that they would be on the journey with us, but they had a reason to buy us even though we weren't the complete solution today.
So that's a great takeaway for me. Like sometimes I think there is this obsession to feature match.
Yes.
As a way to justify when we match all these features, then we'll stay competitive.
Yes.
Like what you're saying seems more like we're going to double down or triple down on the one thing that matters the most, even if we do not have all the other features.
Yeah. I think it's super important in building products of like, you don't have to, if all you have is feature parity and you have no killer differentiator, then you're probably not going to have a successful product. What matters the most is like you have at least one killer differentiating feature. And that killer differentiator is something that a customer will actually make a buying decision on and actually cares about a lot. And if you can do that, then you can usually take a customer on the journey with you for the rest of the roadmap.
Well, I want to talk about that journey too, because one of the differentiators that I've seen, especially in companies that are expanding into multiple products, is at some point you have enough synergies within an organization.
Yes.
It's just the cost of changing is just too high.
Yeah.
Right. And so you can tack in additional products. So I'm curious to know how much of that synergy you were able to experience once you land a client in terms of then to expand that.
From day one, Rubrik's product has been very sticky, even on the initial use case. And that has been a great advantage to us because it allows us to get in and expand with the customer. Certainly, as we've added more and more products into the portfolio, we certainly get new customers that come in and buy the entire portfolio, and that's amazing. But we also have customers that come in and buy one or two products and then expand to other products over time. And so we're able to manage that. And I think there's a lot of value in what we do. It's like, you know, we're a cybersecurity company. We're helping organizations with cyber resilience. Most companies, when we're talking to them, they don't want to have to manage many, many different solutions to solve for their cyber resilience needs across their on-prem environments, their public cloud environments, their SaaS applications. They actually want one platform, if they can get one platform, to manage the majority of that for them. So there is a lot of synergies in being able to say, well, we have the platform, and yeah, you don't have to start buying the whole platform. You can if you want to, but you can start in one place and then you can see how that goes and you can expand with us over time. And there's synergies in terms of our development and our ability to say, hey, we have one platform that can do all of this, and we can add new capabilities pretty easily across the platform. And there's great synergies for the customer who doesn't want to have to manage a lot of different vendors.
So from a product perspective, like what are some of the specific metrics or signals that you can identify to then go to sales and be like, hey, I think this client might be ready for more?
It's a great question. So there's a few things. One is like we look at what is the profile of a customer that might be interested in this next product. And there's some obvious places where it's like, okay, a new product, it has a lot of synergies with this one particular existing product in the portfolio. And so it's obvious that we should just go and try to sell to the customers that have bought that existing product and try to upsell them on this new product. So in some cases, it's very obvious. And that's typically the place where we'll begin, is like, where are the obvious synergies based on just the value proposition of these two products together are stronger.
But is there an additional like metric you are seeing in terms of usage, adoption, number of people that can really say, okay, it's obvious in my mind, but they are also getting enough value for us to then have a larger conversation.
Right. So there's a strategy around it, and then there's like, how do you measure the success? So we'll look at, what is the penetration of this new product at quarter over quarter? What is the penetration of this new product into the existing customer base, or into the existing customer base that had this other product to begin with, depending on what our hypothesis is going in. We'll look at like, what does the new ACV look like? And is this growing at the rate that we expected it to? We come up with forecast. We come up with predictions for all new products. And then we say, well, like, how is it performing against that? We always start with like saying, okay, can we sell this product? And we will look at those signals. But then we also start looking at, are people that are selling it or having bought it, have they implemented the product? Once they've implemented, how we come up with different metrics to say like, okay, they've actually engaged with it in a meaningful way and they're engaging on an ongoing basis. So we track that as well. And then that helps us make sure that we close the loop, that as we sell new products, we're not churning them out. We also track churn really closely, especially on the newer products, because typically what you see in an organization is that newer products have higher churn rates. And so all of these metrics we're looking at were like for all products that we have in our portfolio, and as we launch new ones, I do like quarterly product QBRs, and that's not just with product and engineering. It is reporting on the business of each of the products, but we also bring in the sales representatives that focus on this product, or marketing folks, so that we can have a holistic picture of what is actually going on with each of our products. And we're looking at the metrics together. We're assessing it. Hey, have we really done everything we can to capture the opportunity? What are the emerging problems that we're seeing? And we're addressing those. So that's done on a quarterly basis. But then for the newer products, we have like weekly meetings. And we're trying to make sure that we're seeing the signals quickly and addressing them.
Well, this takes me to the third and final transformation that I want to cover with you, which is org design transformation, aka reorg.
Yes.
Right. So as I hear you talk about having a portfolio of products, trying to protect the new products with dedicated teams, like, can you give me an overview of how is your team structured today, and how is that different from when you started?
So I think for many companies, especially technology companies, when they first start, and for the first number of years of their existence, their product organization tends to be a reflection of their engineering organization, right? Because you have all these different pieces you're building. You need a product manager there to help manage the roadmap, which means that it's very much based on like how the technology is built versus how the technology is sold. And I think as you get bigger and you get into multi-product, the very important thing is that you actually have people that are dedicated and focused to each of the strategic areas. I don't know who originally said this quote. There's a quote that you ship your org chart, right? And so if your org chart isn't aligned with your strategy, then your strategy will become whatever your organizational structure is. So when I joined Rubrik, it was very much like organic in terms of who owned what, how my leadership team was structured. There was a method to the madness, but we weren't thinking about, well, where do we want to be in 3 years? And do we have enough focus in all the critical areas that are going to drive our strategic growth over that time? And do we have the right people with the right expertise to go do that? And so really how I've transformed the business or transformed my organization to meet the needs of the business, both today and in the future, is really understanding what those strategic pillars are. For us, there's a strategic pillar around our core business. There's a strategic pillar around like public cloud and how people use cloud and SaaS applications today. There's a strategic pillar around security, and there's an emerging strategic pillar around AI as well. And so for each of these areas, I have leaders in place and organizations in place to support where we're trying to take these businesses and people with different types of expertise, because these are very, very different areas. And then I have a platform team that makes sure that for the things that need to be consistent across these businesses, we're delivering them in a consistent way. But we give enough leeway for each organization to specialize their knowledge to drive the strategy and business, and also specialize the product as needed.
So it sounds like there's like a platform team.
Yes.
Cross-functional, and then you have specific strategic themes and then dedicated teams for each of them.
Mm-hmm.
So within each of those strategic pillars, I'm curious to know what are the roles that are involved. Is this the classic product design engineering? Is there any other roles that are kind of unique to your org?
Yeah, so there's definitely product design engineering, hands down. That's super important because that's how we actually ship high quality products. But we also have go-to-market alignment as well. And that comes down to like product marketing is certainly aligned to each of these areas, because the message that we want to share, as we're releasing new capabilities, how we talk about them in market, we need that specialization. But then we also have sales specialization. So the thing we experimented with a few different things, and I think we've come up with a great model now where for very early products that we're selling to a completely new persona, we have go-to-market incubation teams that work with us on really validating the value proposition in market and taking those products to market. Because especially with early products, there's often this confusion. If you're having a problem, is the problem that is a selling problem and that you don't have the value proposition articulated appropriately to the customer, or is it a product problem? And you kind of need people like two in a box to really make sure that you are diagnosing the combination of these issues to take a new product to market quickly, especially to a new persona. So we have go-to-market incubation teams, and those teams are small. So that means that we're not having like everyone on the sales team go sell these new products. We have some small teams do it, get some reps getting it successful, and then we off. We've done over the past couple of years, we've created what we call like product line sellers in our core team, which focus on some of the more specialized products that require going and selling into different personas or require different expertise, versus just handing that off to a core rep that owns the entire account. So we've created that kind of differentiation as well. And that's really helped us where we have now products at different stages. We have products in this incubation stage. We have products in this kind of mid-scaling stage where they're definitely getting scale. That might be close to 100 million ARR, but they're still small in comparison to our core business. And that's where we might have these like product line sales. And then we have our core sellers that can sell everything in the portfolio. But obviously they're trying to navigate the entirety of those
So
products.
for you as the CPO, as you look across your org design, how do you go about prioritizing efforts, making sure that those 0 to 1 products are rightly protected, and also that the expectations of success are accordingly managed? Same thing applies to the ones who are in the middle as well as the more mature ones.
I think it's really important and this is what I do with my team, and make sure that all of our stakeholders across the business and across are aligned to this. Is we align on like what are the most important things that we have to get done for each of these areas in the next 6 months and in the next 12 months. And when we have that alignment, it becomes very clear, well, these are the big rocks that we have to go execute on. And here's why for each of these parts of the business. And let's make sure that these big rocks don't get sacrificed for something really small that isn't actually going to move the needle on the business. Now, a big rock for a product that's in incubation is really getting to the point where you can validate some kind of hypothesis. So it might be saying, like, we've defined the MVP to be X because we're trying to test this hypothesis. So we really need to deliver on like at least this functionality. Maybe we have some stretch goals of additional functionality, but at least this functionality to have a product that we could sell in the market, a good enough product to sell in the market. For a more like, mid-stage thing, it's probably going to be like, well, what are the biggest things that are impeding growth? Like, are we seeing a lot of challenges with competition where we have feature gaps? Are we saying, well, we actually are equal to competition in this area, but we don't have enough differentiators that are so strong and obvious that it makes it super clear to a customer that they need to buy this product versus product B? And so that we just like understanding where we are and what is it going to take to unlock the next wave of growth for this business or remove these blockers that we're seeing in the sales cycle. So just like having that framing of like, well, where are we in the business? And then what are the big rocks that need to happen? And for a more mature product, it may be different. It may be, hey, look, like actually we're doing great. There's nothing necessarily, maybe we need like one or two more super innovative features to just be ahead. But we also need to make sure that for these existing customers, in order for them to expand even more with our business, we close some of these gaps in our roadmap. So it's just different. Like we really have to be on top of, especially for a business like ours in a very highly changing industry, is like we kind of think in 6-month increments of saying, what are these big rocks? Let's make sure we're aligned on them. Let's go tell everyone that these are the priorities, 1, 2, and 3 for each of these areas, and everyone goes and executes on it. And then we update our thinking on what that next 6 months looks like.
And how accountable is product for revenue in your case?
So obviously, like the product managers themselves, well, not obviously, but the way we're structured and the way most organizations are structured is product managers don't own the sales team, right? The sales team is not reporting into product. That doesn't mean that the product managers and product leaders shouldn't feel accountable to the revenue numbers and the sales numbers. So I hold my team accountable to the sales numbers, even though they cannot directly control that. Like when I'm setting up goals for the product organization, it is about the new business we're going to sell for each of these new products, in addition to other metrics as well. But I feel the accountability, and I want my team to feel the accountability that we're here to drive the business. We're not just here to ship a bunch of stuff that sounds cool to us. We are here in service of the business. So our goal is to make sure that the business goals are met. And our goal is, the sales team is going to go sell whatever helps them meet their quota. They're not going to be thinking, oh, I want to sell this percentage, this percentage of this product, this percentage of this product, this percentage of this product. That's what our job is. Our job is to say, well, we want to get these products out. We want to have a certain mix of products because we need to ensure that not just this year, but for the next 5 years, there's a growth engine for the business. So that means that like we have to aspire to get each of these products successful in their own right. And we need to know what that success looks like from a business objective. And then we need to relentlessly drive that.
That's what I love about this new wave of product executives. They're business people first, who love technology and can get into the details. But ultimately, there is a higher level of accountability out there than just keeping users happy.
Yes.
One of the things that I find interesting in this new transformation, design people transformation, is that it seems like it could be more iterative than a business model transformation. Correct. Or a repositioning. So how often do you go about updating your org?
It has been an iterative journey. It hasn't been something where like one day I just came up with a brand new org design and I was like, here we are, this is what we're doing now. I've looked at, because there's also only so much change that an organization can absorb. And that has to be thoughtful as well. Is like sometimes, maybe you do want to rip the Band-Aid off because stuff is so broken that you need to do that. But in a vast majority of organizations, there's a real cost to just saying, I'm going to like clean slate and start over new. So you have to be really thoughtful about like, well, again, coming back to the business, like what are the things that are most important in the business to solve for today? And having that that understanding, and then basically saying, hey, do I have the org in place to solve for this today, with an eye towards the future as well, like trying to see around those corners. But that's very much like the approach that I've taken, is saying, well, okay, what's the number one problem that needs to be solved? Let me go solve that. And then let's go think about the next ones and the next ones. For instance, like when I joined Rubrik, like we were in the middle of making this transformation from a perception standpoint to being a cybersecurity company. And I looked at my team, and I didn't come from a cybersecurity background, and neither did anyone else on my team. So I was like, maybe the first thing I should do, the first role I need to hire for, is someone with security experience and security expertise who can help shape our thinking around what does the product suite really need to look like on that journey. And so I hired someone for that. And then there was like another set of issues that I was saying, hey, you know what? We're not making enough progress around how around public cloud and how our offerings really fit into the way that people are consuming public cloud. So that was another area where I started to say, okay, I need to bring in someone to really focus on this with the right kind of expertise and thinking there, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of been this journey of saying, well, like where do I need to go? What are my problems? And really being honest about, hey, do I have the right person in the role to solve those problems?
Yeah,
and what things can afford to wait.
It sounds more iterative than the other two types of transformations. Correct. One of the things that this is, I think, across all three, this is underlying fear that some people can feel. Right?
Yeah.
And probably someone who is in a higher position may have less fear and more information. But I've noticed that even at a smaller scale, that there's always this constant question of, and how is this going to impact me, right? If the company is changing the org, it's changing something, like, what about me, right? So very curious to know if there's any specific thing that come to mind and how you've been able to successfully navigate that or address that feeling that is there to make sure that people can get on board with this new change and not apply extra resistance.
Yeah, it's such a great observation. Any change is really scary, and when people in the organization start seeing that there's a lot of change happening, they really worry, and stress levels go way up. That, you know, hey, am I going to be the next person to go? Am I going to be able to keep up with what's happening in the organization? I think the first part is really just is transparency. So transparency into, well, what is the change that we're driving as a business, and why is this important, and getting people excited about it, giving them knowledge about what it is that we're doing, making them part of understanding the strategy, understanding the direction, giving them opportunities to learn, like whether sometimes it's just skill up leveling. Like for instance, like one of the things I did when I joined was redo our product manager career ladder and expectations. And that was scary for people, of course, because they're like, wow, I'm being evaluated in a totally new way. But it was also good for them to see transparently how are they being evaluated, so that you could have an open conversation about, hey, here are the things that we need to see from you now, and we're going to support you in this journey. We're going to give you resources. We're going to give you training. We're going to, your manager's going to help you. And not to say that it always like went smoothly all the time, but it's like you have to put in the effort and acknowledge that change is really hard, and acknowledge that like you want to bring your workforce on that journey. So how do you give them exposure, training, and visibility into what you expect, and then the ability to actually like, you know, give them an opportunity to step up to what you need versus assuming that they can't do it.
And that was the last thing I wanted to ask you, because sometimes the reality is that some people are not going to make it. And in some cases, maybe you don't even need to try for whatever business reason, right? So for those situations, like, how do you address the messaging? So it's not about getting them excited about the new direction, but truly about finding a way out, the best possible way for everybody.
I think it's like, it's just really being like transparent and honest, and making it like depersonalizing it as much as possible, because like the reality is, if like that's the situation that you're in, there's like a business need that is not being met by either the structure of your organization or a person in the role. And that person like deserves to know that. And so being very like, anytime I have to have that conversation, which is always a really terrible and hard conversation to have, like I always approach it from like, well, if I were that person, like what would I want to know? I would want to really know, why is this happening? And I would want to feel supported in whatever comes next. And so I think one is just being like very transparent and open about why and what the business needs are, and like why this decision has to be made. And then also being like, And the second piece of being supported is like giving them control over some of the aspects of it, giving them control over the timing if possible. And that's not always possible, but sometimes it is. Helping them in their journey for finding what's next, because just because they weren't good for your organization for this role that was needed doesn't mean that they're not good. And you can, as a leader, help people find their next thing, like give them advice, introduce them to people, help them think through that. And I think that's really important. It's often underrated is you can do that and people feel a lot better.
One of my advisors always says that if you don't feel sick to your stomach when you have to have those type of out conversations with people, you're not a human.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the other thing is, and I always tell this to myself when I have to face those situations, is that people usually don't remember what you say, but how you make them feel.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why I think like the honesty, transparency, and really showing that you care for them, that goes such a long way.
Well, Anneka, it's been a pleasure to go through the good, the bad, and the ugly of transformations. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.